Let's try and do one that's not so simple because your anchor point isn't going to be right on the origin. Okay, so suppose the length of time between consecutive high tides is approximately 12.5 hours. In Savannah, Georgia, high tide occurred at 3:30 a.m. and low tide occurred at 9:45. And the depth of the water at high tide was 13.2 feet, and low tide was the depth of 2.2 feet. So our highs and our lows. So the best thing to do to start is to try and find your middle line. Okay, so we're going to bounce in between 13.2 and 2.2, right? So let's put those out. Okay, so we can just do the calculation here. How much distance is in between those two things? Looks like 11, right? Half of 11 is 5.5. Not 10, but 11 is 5.5. So 2.2 plus 5.5 sounds like about 7.7, right? Okay, so I know that my graph, its middle line is going to be there at y is equal to 7.7, and it's going to that sinusoidal behavior is going to bounce in between 2.2 and 13.2. Now, we also have to find where it starts. So it's saying that you're just looking for some sort of starting point where it's either high or low. So it's saying the high tide was at 3:30. So we're going to break that into a decimal and call it 3.5. And that's where I'm going to put my anchor point.
Do you start at midnight?
Sure, I've just decided to start at midnight because it's a nice round number. So that makes each of my times their respective decimals. Does that make sense? So it's just really easy to put 3.5 from 0 here now. And when I go to 9:45, that I can put as 9.75. So choosing the scale and like what you're going to do on the x-axis can make it either easy or hard for you. Okay? And this is all going to finish after the period was 12.5, right? So over here, at the very end, okay, it says the length of time between the high tides, that's the period, right? It's going to go from here to here. After one period, it's going to meet high tide again. It's going to start repeating after this point. What number should I put here? 16, right? Because the distance from here to here is 12 and a half. Okay, I started at 3.5. So that coordinate, I guess, the x-coordinate is going to be 16. All right. This is after this, like that little setup that we just did there is the difficult part. Okay. Like you want to be able to draw this graph so that you've got one cycle here, so that you can go ahead and find the kind of like one cycle of the parent graph that's in terms of cos. Okay. So once I've got this, we can kind of make our one cycle, right? And now from there, we just want to go make our equation. Okay? So again, you find your max and your min, okay? Lay that out. And then I really think that the most important step here for you guys is going to be finding that middle line. Okay? If I'm going in between maxes and mins, I go halfway and then just make sure I find that spot and then somehow map out. They've got to give you the period. All right? So let's see what our equation is here. So my period was 12.5, they said. So that means that my b is going to be 2 pi over 12.5. And because I've got my calculator in my hand, I don't know if I really need to make this any different. If you want to make it look prettier and not have a decimal and a fraction, feel free to put 4 pi over 25, or even to divide those two things and just write the decimal in, okay? But this is, either of these into the equation is fine, okay? So what's my, let's go through the other things that we need. I need my amplitude. How much did we say that was? 5.5. I think it's 5, right? In between, because I had 11 here. Okay, so half of that is going to be 5.5. Okay. My vertical shift, so I'm just going off of the anchor point again here, is going to be 7.7. Lots of times people want to put these as the same numbers. Okay, the vertical shift and the amplitude, that's not the way it works. Okay, make sure that you've got your anchor point identified and pull your vertical and your horizontal shift, off of those. So my horizontal shift was plus 3.5, right? Okay, so when I go to make my equation, I've got a positive cos graph here with an amplitude of 5.5. Okay, I've got a b of 4 pi over 25.
Cosine or sine?
It's going to be cos because, like I said, it's hard to tell where we're measuring from the middle, right? Like we know high tide and we know low tide. We don't know what the tide is. Like I guess you could make a sine curve based on 7.7 now if you wanted to, but the cos one's just an easier one to get to. Okay, it's a good question. Okay, but anyway, x minus 3.5, my horizontal shift, and then plus 7.7. Right? So that should be good. So the payoff here is kind of when we go to dump this into our calculator, and we should see the same graph, right? So let's just do that. I'll cover this up for a second here, and let's take a look at the calculator quick. So let's get rid of these. Okay, and let's dump that in. So I had 5.5 cos of 4 pi and then, yeah, like James, this is where the bracket has to go on the inside here, right? Yeah, x minus 5. And then on the outside of all of that has to be your plus 7.7. Okay, because I've got here out to 16, I'm going to set my window accordingly. Like I've got 13.2 up to here, I've got 16 out to here. So when I go and set up my calculator window, okay, I can push enter here and I get the trig graph. But just so it fits, right, I'm going to go to my menu and set up my window. I hate it when people zoom out, but I know you're going to do it anyway. But I would set this up to size what I already have. So my x min, I don't really need too much of that because we're not going negative. My x max, at least out to 16, so just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to put, I don't know, 20. Okay, y min, we don't need any of that, so I'm just going to leave minus 2 there to leave a little bit of space. And then the y max, I needed at least 13.2, so I'll put like something like 15 there just so it fits nice. Okay, right? And so, like it looks like it's supposed to, right? Like at around 3, at a 3.5, I can kind of just see it's going to go down and up, and then at 16, it kind of finishes. So I know that I'm getting here what I see from there. And that's kind of what you should go for. All right. So what are the two questions they're asking us to? When did the next high tide occur? Okay, I think they're asking about, the next one or this one? So this was the first one. This was the next one. You can take that right off. So this is 3:30 a.m. What time does that make this? How much?
4 p.m.
This is 4 p.m. 4 p.m. And they're asking here, what was the water level at 11 p.m. on that day? So we're looking at, this was 3:30. Where's 11 p.m.? What number is that? 23? Does that sound right? Yeah, I think that's right. So out here someplace, 11 p.m. is going to be at 23. Okay, and then they're saying 11 p.m. on that day. So we started at 3:30 a.m. Yeah, I like it. 23 sounds good. Okay, so let's go up here. Put 23 in for trace. That should be good, right? So it looks like it is going to be 2.586 meters high. Sorry, thanks. 2.586. And it's feet. Okay. Pretty easy. So we could ask a whole pile of questions here. We could say, what was the first time? You know, what was the first time it was at 10 meters? Okay, after 3:30, and we'd put our vertical line here, make a 10, find the intersection, but it's just the same old calculator questions that you've got. Okay, it's this setup that's key, right? That's a good one.